When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. We like to think we form opinions based on evidence and then feel emotions about those conclusions, but it often works backwards. We feel something first, and then we reason our way to justify that feeling. This process is called motivated reasoning, and it explains why smart people can reach opposite conclusions from the same information and why facts rarely end emotional arguments. Unlike confirmation bias, where we seek supporting evidence, motivated reasoning involves actively constructing arguments to reach predetermined conclusions. A lawyer building a case isn't necessarily seeking truth, they're seeking to win. Our brains often work the same way, playing attorney for positions we're emotionally invested in. The smarter someone is, the better they become at motivated reasoning, using their intelligence to construct elaborate justifications. Think about that friend who always dates problematic people. They don't just overlook red flags, they construct elaborate explanations for why those red flags are actually green. Their jealousy shows they care. Their inability to hold a job demonstrates some free-spiritedness or creativity. This isn't stupidity, it's intelligence working in the service of emotional needs. In family conflicts, motivated reasoning can create alternate realities. Research by the psychologist Peter Ditto shows we scrutinize threatening information more carefully than we welcome news. Given fake medical test results, people who were told they had an enzyme linked to health problems spent longer examining the information and were more likely to point out flaws in the methodology. Those told they were healthy accepted the results immediately. We become brilliant critics when motivated. Recognizing motivated reasoning can transform our disagreements, though. When positions seem impossibly entrenched, we can ask, what emotional need does this belief serve? Instead of attacking someone's conclusions, we can explore what would have to be true for them in order to change their mind. Understanding that we all engage in motivated reasoning can create some space for humility. Maybe our own ironclad logic isn't as objective as we would like to think. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Our guest today on When We Disagree is Todd Glover. Todd is the Executive Director of the Municipal Association of South Carolina after a multi-decade career in local government. Todd, tell us an argument story.
Well, it's great to be with you this morning, Michael. Thank you for the invitation. Early in my career, as I mentioned in the intro, I was working local government for about 25 years. Early in my career, I was working for a suburban county in Georgia, and in those days, we had a budget of about $150 million, which then was still a lot of money, but then it was a heck of a lot of money. And we had our required public hearings, 3 public hearings, and not one single citizen out of a county of 125,000 people showed up. Not one person. We were also simultaneously working on a rebranding for our county. New logo cost us about $25,000, and the night that was being approved, it was standing room only. I honestly thought that none of us were going to make it out of there alive. People were angry. We had to bring in sheriff's deputies. I mean, just if you can picture this politically charged room, and it was one of the worst meetings I've ever been through in my 25 years of public service. And there was one protagonist who was kind of a thorn in our side all along. He was kind of leading the charge on this. And I went up to him after the meeting and I said, I was trying to be a little smart, actually, and I was young in my career. You know how that is.
I get it.
And I asked him, I said, we passed a $140 million budget. You didn't say a word. We tried to do $25,000 rebranding study, and you're ready to run us out of here on a rail. Why is that? I'll never forget his response. He said, I don't understand 140 million. I understand 25,000.
Okay. Explain that to me. I don't really get it.
Well, it's something that's framed the rest of my career. And when I talk to MPA students going into the field, even when I even as a city manager, when I did things, I always went back to that disagreement that we had. 140 million to just an average person is such an abstract number that it's hard for them to even come out and discuss it, or you just throw it. It's like when you hear the federal government and we have a $3 trillion
Sure.
you know deficit or things like that. But to him, $25,000, he knew what that $25,000 was real to him. It was a new car, or
Hmm.
renovations to his house, or perhaps even his salary. I don't know what he
Right.
made in a year. To him, that $25,000 seemed like a waste. In the totality of 140 million, it was so abstract that it didn't strike home with him at all.
I could see this going one of two ways, which is you could use this for the light arts of public engagement if you really wanted people to understand the issues that affected them and speak in numbers that are more approachable and less lunar. Or you could use this as the dark arts and camouflage your dealings in much larger numbers that are in the billions and trillions in the hopes that you alienate people with large figures that are completely inaccessible to them. So let's get right down to it. Todd, how have you used this important piece of information?
I've always I'd always used it to, I think, for good, trying to make sure that while I had a grasp of what I was talking about, not everyone in the public did. And just because we have initiatives going on and we can get into this kind of bubble and we think, well, nobody's out here opposing it, so we must be doing okay.
Right.
Never stop to think, are people actually understanding what we're doing enough to oppose us? And so I've always had to try to have that mindset. I've never agreed with that guy ever. He was a thorn in my side at every meeting. Um, and I would hate to tell him now. He may not even be alive now. He was an older gentleman. This was 2 decades ago. I'd hate to even tell him that I learned a life lesson from him. He's
That's
such
right.
a protagonist, but um, it is something that stuck with me, and I think it's important as a public official that you make sure that you know your audience and that you adequately explain what you're doing, the work that you're doing, and that you never take for granted that just because someone is not speaking out against what you're doing, is that you may not have explained it well enough for them to know that they're opposed to it.
I think this gets down to a real fundamental question about governance and governing and even democracy, really, which is perhaps if you're in the seat of government, there is contrary impulses, which is one, if you're doing something that's unpopular or potentially unpopular, to invite people into local government, to invite them to air their grievances and to be antagonists to you is potentially risky to your job,
Very much.
to your livelihood, to your immediate mental health if you're getting screamed at in a crowded room with deputy sheriffs everywhere. And then the other impulse, of course, is to be an ethical governor and actually be a practicing small d Democrat and invite people into the political process by explaining what you're doing and getting their feedback and shaping policies that impact their lives in a way that has their input. It sounds like you have a much more ethical approach to this, but speaking outside of your purview and your experience and what drives you, what incentives do people who work in local government have to use the $24,000 figure instead of the $140 million figure? In other words, what incentive do they have to really invite people into the process to help them understand the policies that impact their lives?
Well, I think it's several factors, and one of the biggest factors is I think when people fully understand an issue, you can have a much better, calmer discussion over it. A lot of times when people either misunderstand, don't know, um, fear enters the equation, and it's typically very heated conversations. When I instruct councils on how to conduct meetings, I always tell them to put as much information out there as they can ahead of time. give everything that you're giving to a council member or a mayor, give it to people ahead of time. So when they walk in that door, they know, as much as could be expected, almost as much as anyone in the room is going to be voting on it. I think that the input that you can get from people at that point is much more productive than people learning about things on the fly or not understanding things. And then you don't have productive meetings at all, because, to assume that you have all the answers is not a good path to go down. And when you have a public hearing, are you going through the steps of a public hearing because you're required to do it? Or are you actually interested in hearing what people have to say, their actual feedback, so that you can adapt your initiative to implement some of the good ideas that came from the discussion? If people don't have a clear understanding of it, I think you're just missing a step.
I'll admit that something else is coming up, which is also sort of central to the whole democracy project, which is that citizens have the capacity for full understanding of really complicated issues and then can calmly air their voices, right? All of democracy is kind of a gamble on the reasoning ability of strangers,
right,
of people you'll never meet. And then to what extent you think that those people are capable of real understanding, of rationality, of deep thought, of careful contemplation, of reading, of sustained attention. All of the things are assumptions when you say, look, we instruct our folks to give out lots and lots and lots of information. There's an assumption there that they'll go through it, that they'll go through it carefully, that they'll understand what they're reading, their comprehension and retention levels will be really high. And then, therefore, as you say, when they fully understand things, it leads to calm discussions. When they misunderstand, it leads to fear and heat. Explain that distinction. Explain your faith in this comprehension and understanding abilities of the citizens, and the argument that full understanding leads to calm discussions.
Well, I'd like to say that it always does, but it doesn't. It doesn't mean that when someone fully understands it, they're not still going to be mad. And I've seen that, a lot of times as well.
Okay.
I just think that I guess in that assumption, going back to my original example, we were prepared to discuss that very intricate $140 million, $150 million budget.
Yeah.
And we thought that issue of the rebranding was such an easy, understandable item that we did not do our homework. We did not do the pre-work ahead of time to put that information out. And all of that meeting could have been avoided, I feel like, if people had known the facts ahead of time. I've been in meetings where when I was city manager in another city, there was a rumor on social media. I mean, here we go with social media. If we're talking about accurate information, right? And there was a rumor that got out that we were trying to annex a community next to us, and they asked if we would come to a public meeting. And the mayor and I show up, and I'm not kidding, there were 500 people in this church gymnasium.
Oh boy.
And I was so thankful it was a church, because I was like, well, this might be our one saving grace. People may respect the church ground. Within the first 5 minutes, when we explained, probably 3/4 of the room got up and left. And again, I was reminded we did a poor job of getting the accurate information out there so that people had a full understanding of what it was. So again, the reaction was fear. It was hostile. And I've just always learned that it doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree. It doesn't mean that they're going to be happy. It doesn't mean they're not going to rail and get mad and be very angry with you. But in the majority of instances, I found that if they have all the information ahead of time, it cuts off a lot of the needless things that happen that you don't. It's just a waste of time.
The stories you're telling remind me of two old political adages, really simple ones. One is define yourself or be defined. And then the second one is if you're explaining, you're losing.
That's right. Absolutely.
Which is to say that you got to get out in front of this information. Otherwise, people are going to create a story about it. Hence the 3/4 of the people realizing en masse in real time, I think we might have been misinformed and this is not a big deal. And then just saying, well, we're going to leave this church auditorium or gymnasium.
Well, I always say that, Winston Churchill said a lie travels around the world before the truth puts on its pants.
Right.
And he lived, 70 years before Facebook. So consider the realm in which we work now, where I even find now, reading through social media, whether I actually know what I'm talking about or not, just because I see, you may see a screenshot somebody posts on there, some kind of meme, some kind of story, and it's almost a full-time job now for you to keep up with trying to fact check everything that you hear. I think that's also important when you consider that as a governmental agency, if you ever get the reputation of not putting out the accurate information, then you always have an uphill battle, because everything from then on, people are not going to trust.
Todd, sort of big picture stuff as we close here. After a multi-decade career in government, I'm curious about your faith in the reasoning abilities of strangers, as we talked about it earlier. We live in a time of some increasing suspicion about the democratic project, of certain threats to the democratic project, whether those are explicit threats or implicit threats to the public's attention and information gathering and media literacy. And is this a good source? Is this a bad source? Is this good information, bad information? You get the idea. And so describe, and you at least exude a kind of faith in the reasoning ability of strangers, if I'm reading between the lines, that I find heartening, even inspiring. So amidst all these threats, both explicit and implicit, attention and governmental, describe your faith in the reasoning abilities of strangers, of the random folks you meet in auditoriums and gymnasiums and churches in Georgia, South Carolina, and everywhere else.
Well, that's why I love local government. That's why I'm passionate about local government, because it's the level closest to the people. When you say strangers, I think that's the issue. If they are a stranger to you as a local government, that's your problem. That's the problem you have to address. We are the level of government that I have to face you at the school drop-off line. I see you at the grocery store, at church, in the local restaurants. That's where you build the trust. That's where you are open to people and provide that information. And I think at the local level is where people aren't strangers. And that's where the most pure debate, the most pure information sharing, the most pure democracy occurs. And I'm very, very passionate about it. I've dedicated my career to it.
Todd Glover, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you, sir.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.